A huge warm welcome to Art Gallery Explorer, art lovers. This is the vlog that takes you inside art galleries and exhibition spaces across London, the southeast of England and beyond. I'm here today in the village of Petworth in West Sussex to visit a new gallery which I've heard a lot of good things about but never visited before. It's called the Newlands House Gallery. It was set up in 2020 and I've already seen on the art grapevine that there's been some really interesting shows featuring artists like Franco Abad and Miro and others. The show I want to bring you today is looking at British surrealist Leonora Carrington, whose reputation has grown massively since her death at the age of 94 in 2011. She's unique in the sense she was at the heart of the surrealist movement in a relationship, for example, with Max Ernst, and yet she carried on painting right till the end of her life. And I'm hoping that this exhibition covers the whole of her career. Her reputation has grown since her death at the age of 94. In this year, 2024 in May, one of her works sold for $28 million at Sotheby's in New York, making her the most expensive ever British female artist. So I can't wait to head inside and explore this show and explore this gallery and bring it to you. I'll fill in a little bit more detail about Carrington as we go in, but it is apt that she's being displayed here in West Sussex because one of her biggest benefactors lived just down the road at Westdean, which is now a college but was an ancestral home. So come and join me as we head inside and explore the wonderful, surreal world of Leonora Carrington. Leonora Carrington seems to have chafed and rebelled against the role society prescribed to her from an early age. Born in 1917 in a large country house, Crutchley Hall, with 3 brothers, she longed and pushed for the freedom they were afforded. She was expelled from 2 boarding schools and struggled at finishing schools in Florence and Paris, but fell in love with the art that she saw in these cities, especially the Renaissance art of Florence. The biggest bequest her childhood gave her was a host of fantastic stories, often told by her nanny or Irish mother in an old house, which triggered her imagination. Carrington was a writer as well as a surrealist artist, and we see extracts from her writing throughout the show. Carrington fell in love with the art of Max Ernst at the 1936 Surrealist exhibition before falling in love with him when they met in 1937. Ernst was 46 when they got together and on his second marriage, whereas Carrington was just 20. And this relationship caused a scandal with Carrington's father, a rupture with him that never healed. But she found a new family in the Surrealist movement, firstly in Cornwall in a group that included Man Ray and Henry Moore, and then in Paris and the south of France, where Ernst and Carrington settled in the farmhouse you can see here, that was purchased by Leonora's mother, who she stayed close to. Ernst and Carrington decorated this farmhouse at St Martin d'Ardèche, and later in the exhibition we see that 8 decades on, the house remains, with the reliefs that you can see here. There are some wonderful photos of these happy times, often taken by Roland Penrose, which I can't show you. But in 1940, Ernst was arrested as the shadow of war fell over France. He was an enemy alien, and Carrington fled to Spain. In Spain as an exile, staying with family friends, and with her life of happiness and artistic freedom destroyed, Carrington suffered a catastrophic breakdown and was committed to an asylum in Santander. Family intended to send her to South Africa, but she resisted this and fled to Portugal, where she was brought into the company of the Mexican ambassador to Portugal. She arranged a marriage of convenience with him, and they both left Europe, firstly for New York and then Mexico City, where she settled and stayed from 1942 until her death. Once in Mexico, she ended the marriage of convenience amicably and eventually married Hungarian photographer in exile Chicky Weiss, bearing 2 sons. And the exhibition states that this was a final stage of freedom from the expectations of her family. This room shows representations of some of her most well-known works from the early years in Mexico. But the exhibition's also really strong at pointing out the myriad influences on Leonora Carrington. She was obviously a surrealist, as you can see from these works, and surrealism and the influence remained at the heart of her painting. But she was also very interested in and influenced by Robert Graves, by fairy stories, Irish myths and legends, religion, Catholicism, Buddhism, the Kabbalah, the occult, and she developed in Mexico a interest in Aztec and Mayan forms of expression, which you can clearly see in this sculpture here. Leonora had a studio in her house in Mexico, and in the 1950s, a family of scrape weavers of Aztec heritage came to live in the house along with their loom. Leonora Carrington would create the designs, and then the weavers would realize the images in tapestry. Many of the forms and figures are similar to the paintings, but the plain background allows the tapestries to take center stage. You can still see a surrealist influence in these works, but there's something different about the starkness of the image. One of the highlights of the exhibition is a chance to explore Carrington's sculptures. These especially came from the later period of her life when she was not able to paint, so she turned to sculpture as another form of expression. And even in very late works like this one, The Palmist, created in the very last years of her life, you still see that surrealist influence from the 30s, which kick-started her artistic voice. One of the most interesting parts of the exhibition is the section entitled Animal Instincts. And it makes the point that animals were a subject matter that Leonora Carrington returned to again and again across the decades of her creation, both on paper, paint, and in sculpture as well. She returned to some animals like horses multiple times, but was also interested in exploring more esoteric animals like this piece on crocodiles, which you can see here. And the exhibition makes the point that she, obviously as a human animal, was very, very prepared and willing to embrace her own animal nature in hence the title of the room, Animal Instincts. She saw herself very much as an animal. And you see that in some of the quotes that adorn the walls. And she was also proud to have close relationships with other animals, whether it be domestic dogs or animals in zoos. And these animals are represented in a series of sculptures and drawings in this room. It was certainly a blind spot in my knowledge of Leonora Carrington that she had a long association with the theatre, and the theatre was a big love and inspiration to her art. At the centre of this section of the exhibition are three masks which were produced by Leonora Carrington for the 1959 production of The Tempest. And Carrington, although she was based from 1942 until her death in Mexico City in the Roma district, she did spend considerable time in New York City, that center, a mecca of theatre. She produced designs, for example, in the 1970s for a play by Belarusian-born Jewish writer S. Ansky called Between the Worlds, and you can see some of these here. And this is an absolute highlight of the exhibition, this sort of the sense you get of this artist who was producing in so many forms and had so many interests. Although the classic big surrealist oil paintings are not here, you learn so much more about other aspects of her practice instead. Leonora Carrington's life is in chafing against the expectations and refusing to accept the expectations put on her as a woman. It means that she is a living, breathing example of feminism, really since her very young days. But she got involved in the women's rights movement in the 1970s. And there was a powerful, obviously, feminist message to some of her work. The exhibition also makes clear that she produced right up until her death. And in this sense, she has this unique role as a surrealist who was embedded in this mid 20th century movement, who was still producing work influenced by surrealism into the 2000s. By 2010 to 11, she was often forgotten. She was still working, producing sculptures in Mexico City, but her reputation had diminished to the point where she wasn't a central figure in the art scene. And since that time, thanks to things like this exhibition, we're able to rediscover and appreciate her work.
Well, I really, really hope you enjoyed that exploration there of the Leonora Carrington show from Newlands House Gallery here in sunny West Sussex. I've actually got the bus across, from Petworth to Pulborough Station, where I'm waiting for the London-bound train out here in the countryside. And so I thought I'd wrap up the vlog from the platform. And I did really enjoy the show and the gallery. And I would start by saying the staff were really welcoming at the gallery. They were passionate about Carrington and about the art show. They were really wanted the visitors, and it was quite busy, I have to say, which is great, to enjoy this show. And they were saying, it's got some good publicity in national papers like The Guardian, The Times, The Eye newspaper, which has certainly helped visitor numbers. So do get down there for that. It made me want to come back, because I thought, wow, if they're as passionate about this show, I'm sure they're going to be passionate about all the art that they display. In terms of the Carrington show itself, it was a good show. The highlight was definitely being reminded of the range of her work. She's obviously most well known as a painter, an oil painter, but for me the highlight of this show was the sculptures, and to a lesser extent the tapestries as well. I just wasn't aware of the sort of range of her sculptures, and there were some beautifully sculpted pieces, some long fingers, very feminine surrealist pieces, and so that was really impressive, and I enjoyed the tapestries too. It was a pity there wasn't more oil works. There was some lithograph reproductions of some of her most famous works, produced by her and signed by her, so that kind of made up for it. But the sculptures and were the ones that I sort of spent time circling around and looking at again and again, and I hadn't seen many of them before, so that was brilliant. And overall, I would say the show was a very tasty aperitif for what I think is due to be another really big Carrington show at one of our national institutions, which includes lots of loans of some of those oils. Probably it would be at Tate Britain, I would hope. So let's watch this space and see if we're going to get the much longed for Carrington big retrospective, almost like a all you can eat buffet after this very nice aperitif. I thought that £14.50, just have to remind myself, for a full price ticket was reasonable value actually. There's a really nice cafe which you can see here. And so I would say overall, if you add in the wonderful Petworth House, which has this outstanding collection of Turners and other art, which is £20 to get into, and then also Newlands House Gallery, which is now a big draw down here, especially if you're coming for the Carrington show, and then some of the private galleries, which you can see here, which are peppered around this very quaint, if traffic choked, small town, then this becomes a really attractive art trip from London or elsewhere in the southeast. So I recommend it coming down. £14.50, as I say, I think it's good value. The show is on until the 26th of October. Hit that notification bell for more reviews of shows across London, the southeast of England and beyond. Thank you ever so much for watching, and thank you to those people who are commenting. I apologise, I've been away, and so it's taken me a lot longer to reply to the comments, but I always read and reply to every single comment that is put on the vlog. Thank you.